Thank you very much. And I'm happy to be here. So, yes, I'm Matias Lopez. Just a little bit about me, just before start. My area of expertise has been these last years mobile, actually free-to-play live games. So that's why this talk is a little bit more zeroed out on that. Though you're gonna see around the presentation that actually applies to, any kind of development of games. Um, I started actually my career in gaming in Colibri Games in Berlin as a QA, and then moved up my way until product manager slash producer, basically leading the main feature team of the game. So it's the main game of the company is Idle Miner Tycoon. It's a very big idle game, mobile game that's been in the market for quite a while. And yeah, from that experience, most of these insights actually, because it's going to be quite industry oriented, right? Come from. So to start, what are the goals of this talk? The first thing that I want to do, like the first half of the talk, is actually explaining a bit. I will not go through all the challenges, but like the key challenges that free-to-play live games have. Hit free-to-play because I'm talking about a little bit more the massive games. There are some examples there, mostly mobile, but again, remember a live game is actually a game that's being updated constantly, that has a big player base. So any kind of game actually applies for this. But for mobile, it's even more dynamic, even more fast. So yeah, that's why of those examples. After I do that, I will jump into sharing insights on the efficient feature implementation. So quite much more production. Basically, what you need to have to be on time, and most importantly, have impact. So yeah, let's jump into it. First thing, live games. So I want to make a little bit of a difference in between how to get to be a hit live game. Most likely, what you all know is a new game. You're making a game from scratch. You have an idea, you start from zero. You need to nail down things like core loop, the balancing of the game. And in the industry, when you're actually doing this in a big studio, because studios are doing new games all the time, they're trying to get the next hit. You need to be super fast. Iterations, soft launch, market test, you're trying to meet KPIs. Is actually this game makes sense? Do people like it? Do we continue to play? So if you actually go for this process where many games die, by the way, like they rise and die. If you're meeting KPIs, you most likely you're going to go to a global launch, and that actually means you put it to the stores. Before it's actually also in the stores, but for a very little amount. Global launch means, okay, you're actually putting marketing money on it, and you're going to start having much more users. Then it's already a live game, actually. Okay, so this is already a live game. It's out there. You're probably focusing with your team on having more content, so main and new features that you want to have. You're probably trying to expand monetization on the already users that you have. Live ops, which I will not go in details, but it's basically all the events that you have during the game. A season pass is a live ops, for instance. You most likely starting to do that. So that also has a lot of backend and whatnot. And you're going to have more data. So you're going to keep improving the game, optimizing the game with the data gathered that you have. Okay, so we are here. If you do everything right, and this step is super, super hard. Like that's why there's so little, let's say, hit games in the market. But you do things right, even if you're lucky, I don't know. But you scale up and enough time, you're eventually going to become a hit like game, which means that you have a big number of players, like hundreds of thousands of players every day going to your game. A sizable portion of them are VIP players, or sometimes in the industry called like whales, right? You spend a lot of money in your game. You have important presence on the market. You have featuring. You have IP collaborations with movies, whatnot. You probably have a very strong live ops schedule, and another thing, you have a large community, right? From where you get a lot of feedback, actually. Okay, so this is a little bit the difference, and what I'm going to talk right now is the last one, live games. They have different challenges. It's more stressful as well. It's also more rewarding, but you need to have a lot of things in consideration, actually, when you're producing a feature in a game like this. So you have two key challenges. And here I will not enter into detail, but I hope that I can express right these challenges, which are basically daily. Every day, you get a group of installs in the game, 50K, 100K, and it's a free to play game. So you're gonna get a lot of people coming in, but the amount of people that stay in the game is very little. So you could say that after day one, perhaps these are dummy numbers, 60% are there, day 7, 15% are there, day 30, 5% are there. That's fine. That's actually not an issue. Different games have different curves for this, but this stays. Like, you're gonna lose players during the way, and that's fine. But the thing is that what you're trying to solve every day is those installs most likely cost you money because you are spending some marketing to get them. And the revenue that you get from that people going to the game needs to be higher of that cost. If not, you're basically losing money every day, right? So you need to have that under control. I will not get into detail on the KPIs, but it's basically eCPI, which is cost of installs considering the organic installs that come free from the store, and LTV is the long-term value of the players. What I want to get with this is, if you're not making this happen, you cannot bring more people to the game. You cannot scale your game. When I'm talking about scaling up, it's like you're getting more people to play your game, 50K, 100K a day, 600K. Some very good games have millions of people every day. If you wanted to improve that cost of installs, well, you need to optimize probably user acquisition, UA, get store features, things like that. But if you want to improve the revenue, you really need to increase this early part of the revenue. Mind you, of course, there's people that are going to stay playing your game for years, and that's the case. But at the beginning, let's say, you have most of the players. So you need to try to improve that early revenue as much as possible, retain them. You want them to keep playing your game. So you need to actually improve this first-time user experience, FTUE, as much as possible. Try to improve the spender conversion rate, which, well, that means that the spend in the very first days of the game. It sounds evil, but it actually means that the player is quite engaged. They're liking the game so much that they're willing to invest on it. And just as a side note, this is usually very much A/B test heavy. So A/B test, basically, you think of a little improvement here and there, but you don't put it live for all the people in the game. You just test it about a cohort of installs against another one, and you actually test with data, was this better or worse? Because it's super hard to improve this as well. So that's the first challenge, let's say. Give me 1 second. Scaling up, or at least maintaining where you are. The second one is retaining engaged players. So if I talk to you about the daily active users of your game, so how many people play your game on a given day, that's the total amount. After a game being years, right, it's gonna start to build up an amount of spenders or more engaged players in there. This classic Pareto of 80-20 will happen. Like, this amount of players are responsible for the 80% of or a big portion of your revenue. And then inside those players, you have, let's call them VIPs, which again, those are representing the big portion of actually all what you're earning in the game. These players are highly engaged. They likely been playing the game for years, and I really mean years. Even if the game is super casual, and actually IMTs, I would say kind of a mix in between, casual and it's not hyper casual at all. It's not super hardcore. It's a little bit in the middle. Like, you have ads and you also have IAPs, purchases. But yeah, you have people that are playing the game for years. They're part of their habits. They play it every day. They love it, and they are protected as well of what they have. And they're likely at the very end of the game content. It depends how you're scaling your game, but I don't know, there's a reason why in Candy Crush they need to develop new levels every day. They're very engaged with the community, and they're very responsive to live ops and new additions to the game. So, and this is super important also for the daily revenue, because these kind of events Christmas, special character, a special IP. These are the players that they don't want to miss out, and they're actually gonna, boost your revenue. It's very, very hard to convert a new install to a big player. It's much better to retain these players. So this second challenge is actually, what should I do every day as a studio, right? A studio's development and also publishing in this case, to keep these players so they don't just churn and say, I don't want to play your game anymore. So you're basically against time. If you don't do anything, so let's say we stop, we don't update the game at all, you're gonna scale down because competition enters the market, very cool games are out there, your game starts to have an outdated feel to it. The competition also makes that the market, they go super aggressive with marketing, the cost of getting new installs goes up. You don't change the game, so the revenue, it's the same or worse, so you're eventually gonna start going down. And your valuable players will churn because, well, there's nothing new. They're probably exhausted all the content. They have no new gameplay, no new reason to grind. So every day that passes, actually, well, you're going down until you get a good update out there. You have a little bit of a jump, and you're constantly like that. Then, if that's the case, and I would say that this is a little bit the case for any game, right? But especially for these kind of live games, free to play, you really want to avoid, when you're implementing a new feature with your team, you want to avoid, first of all, being slow. So you don't know what to do for a long time, a big part of the time, and late. So you say, hey, this is going to be 3 months development, and it was 5, and non-impactful. So you basically missed it. Like, okay, this was the update, it's a very big update. You put it out, and nothing happened. Like a couple of players, oh, yeah, that's cool, but all your KPIs, revenue, engagement, play time, didn't move. So that's basically the reason of this first part of the presentation, is just to stress out why is it actually important that you're efficient and you are avoiding these two things. So let's jump to the second part of it, which is basically these insights about the development cycle. Because as so far, I've just been talking about general things about free-to-play live games, right? You can see, you can learn that anywhere. And also was very on the top. Here, what I want to do, and disclaimer, I'm not trying to set a pipeline. Every studio works different. They have a different way to organize their teams. Usually, you have a big teams also for these games, like 40 plus people. I'm not trying to say exactly how it should be. I'm just trying to share insights in each of these stages of the development cycle, so you avoid not being impactful and being very, very late. So let's super simplify the development cycle, which pre-production, then eventually jump to production, actually doing it, right? Pre-production is what should I do, doing it, and releasing and monitoring, actually, because it's not like you release things and that's it. So anything in between, which new feature should we add, to, okay, it's on the player's hands. So this whole process is what I'm going to talk right now. So let's jump to pre-production. And the big question, what should we do? Super hard question to answer, to be honest. And I would say the recommendations that I have here, well, the first one is know your game. And again, these are pretty big games, also they've been for years. So ways of knowing from your game, first one is community feedback. So like the players know a lot, normally much more than you knew about your own game. And you need to be up to date. At least that's my recommendation. Be up to date with what they're saying. Then we live in a data-driven world, and I can be sure that all the companies with big live games have a very strong data pipeline in there. You need to check the data. You need to know your data, your KPIs, where is the game going down, that this is daily, specific features. And these two things comes with time. Then, of course, you can have like little ideas and go zero out or make a deep dive into a data thing. But you have a lot of information in there. But these two things, in my opinion, are incomplete if you're not a player of your game. Okay? So you need to be a player. You need to be a daily player and try to put your shoes on a player, so not as, let's say, the product manager of the game, but actually as a just normal player and play your game. If you don't do that, you're not gonna fully understand what the community are saying. You're also not gonna get all the little things like the UI, little thing here and there, little improvements that you know that you could make. So this be a player is essential. Also, you find a lot of bugs in the way. So that's the first thing. Like, you need to know your game. Then you need to know your genre. So you need to play a competitions game. You need to know what they're doing, especially if suddenly a game of the competition is going really good. What are they doing? Do you have different placement? How did they implement this feature? You get a lot of inspiration out of that. Doesn't mean that you're gonna copy exactly what's going on in there, because even if you try that, you need to try to put it on, adapt it to your game, which is a completely different game. But this is pretty key as well, because remember, the game is already done. Your game has been there for years. You're not trying to super reinvent the wheel. You need to be a little bit safe and be careful of the risks. The other recommendation that I do, so you need to decide exactly what to do. Try to keep the core, and I really mean core brainstorm group of this small. Never do it alone. I would say never, because yes, you could have good ideas, but out of experience, those ideas is like one brainstorm session, 20 minutes with your peer, and you realize, actually it would not work. These brainstorm sessions are amazing. I also recommend to do it in person if you can, and with a whiteboard. But try to keep it small, like 2, or you already can do it. 3, 4, I think you're pushing it. More than that, super hard to get aligned. What's the objective of the feature? What should we change? You are gonna delay the decision, basically. And you also have the risk of deciding on something that's like the common denominator of what everyone thinks that could work. And that usually is a feature implementation. So you're trying to decide what you're gonna do. Define your scope and the high level changes of the feature first. When I'm talking about high level, it's like really main mechanics. You're not gonna reinvent the game completely. Usually, even big updates of 4 months, 5 months development, you're not doing the version 2.0 of the game, right? So a high level of what are you changing? Where is your new feature, let's say, connecting with the current game? Are you reworking something? Are you adding something? Are you adding a part of additional part of an existing feature? Are you making an event that's completely new? Those are the kind of things that you really need to nail down. And don't break the game. I don't say this as a joke, like really, because you can go crazy creative in this, but again, this game already works. Already, like it managed to be a hit game. It has a defined core loop. If your feature idea is changing the core loop, you're probably way off. I would advise you not to present that unless you have a very good reason, but I cannot think of one. And you could also work in design-wise. You have a lot of features interacting. So what are you adding? Is it making a whole part of the game useless now? That's super risky. Like players farming and grinding one part of the game for years, and suddenly you add something that's like, all your effort, doesn't matter anymore. Try not to create rigid systems. Think a little bit in the future. Of course, everyone wants the update right away, but don't do something that you cannot scale. That like after a year or even less, I don't know, a couple of months, the player, I'm finished with the feature. Avoid that, and that's hard to maintain. Wow. Check technical feasibility. Your game, again, probably has some years on it, has a little bit of legacy. Once you have this scope, high level, talk with your devs, talk with the technical part of the team. Can this be made? Is this possible? Does this require to change a whole part, and our rough estimation of five, let's say, 3 months are now 6 months? Well, then that update probably cannot do it. This is super important. Try to do it as soon as possible. And lastly, I know I said that try to give the brainstorm team or decision small, and that I mean for the core decision. Could be you as a product manager with the lead designer and the game director, or two product managers and the producer. I don't know. That group needs to align and have a good feeling about it. But that doesn't mean that you don't need to present it. You need to present it and get feedback from the team and peers. Basically, look for any red flags that you might have missed. Like, oh, like suddenly another member of the team could say, "Did you thought about that?" And well, you didn't, and maybe your idea is now unviable. And also super important to be transparent with what are you gonna do. Depends how your studio is formed. Us, at least, we have like 4 feature teams. So unless you are transparent, people don't know what you're doing. Maybe they're doing something at the same time that clashes. Overall, it's good to be transparent about these kind of things. Now, there's a question which is also hard to answer, which is when should we jump from pre-production and production? In the ideal world, you have everything ready for your update. You have full-fledged GDD, you have all the assets, you have all the wireframes from UX, you know exactly the balancing, and the devs have everything in their hands to go for it. Could be, I'm not saying that like if you have that, great. But in this fast-paced environment, sometimes that's not possible because people are working on other things, and if you're actually waiting for all that stuff, well, you're not starting with that thing. So here, and it really IMO, in my opinion, there's a little bit of a minimum, I would say, minimum requirement for development to start. And when I say development, it's like, okay, we decided we're doing this, developer starts coding, right? The scope of the core changes really needs to be set on stone. Like, what you're gonna change, is this a different mode of the game, a different event? Like, please set it on stone. It's not fun at all that you start development and suddenly, oh, we didn't want to do that. Super demotivating, super frustrating, and you are super late again for an update. The client and backend interactions and requirements are super important also for the tech team. Know that what's remote, what's not. And I would also advise to have a basic user flow of how the user is gonna interact with this feature. Actually, like, but really basic. For new users, so new installs, and also for existing users. During production, don't worry, because think it could be a small feature, and actually didn't mention this could be for a feature of 2 weeks or a feature of 4 or 5 months. Now I'm talking a little bit more long feature because it's also what my team does. If you already have that, you can start with things, and don't worry. During production, you can work in parallel. Final UI UX, wireframes, balancing, localization, art assets. You can use placeholders. You can do it, though communication is key. Like, your team needs to communicate amazing. You need to be there, so you avoid working on things that could change. Like, avoid people assuming that this is what you want. You need to be very clear. This model can be worked on. We need it. This is still work in progress. So let's say that we jump then in production. If you're going to do many things in parallel, which is going to be most likely the case, you need to manage and avoid blockers. And by the way, this is right now from the point of view of, let's say you're leading the update. You are the main accountable person for this update. It doesn't matter if you're a product owner, product manager, lead designer, whatever. But you need to manage and avoid blockers or producer. You need to avoid these blockers. So easiest example, art. If art cannot start working on a final view if they don't have the wireframes via UX, you need to try to things fall perfectly. If the dev team is waiting for a specification from the designers of how remote config should look, they're gonna get stuck. All these kind of things are day-to-day stuff of production that you need to be aware. Especially if the update is big, try to stage it. If it's a very big update, try to go with your team and say, okay, there's a clear stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, and have a clear definition of done. A stage 1 could be full of placeholders and just we're able to send information of the event from the backend, and the event appears as a white circle on an island on the map. That's fine, but you know that you need that. If you're able to do that, you can QA early as well. And that's, well, I try to push that quite a bit, because as the earlier you find the bug, the earlier you're going to fix it. You really don't want to get on the final week with 80 bugs to fix. It's madness, and I already experienced it. So really try to QA early as much as possible. And a little thing that could be done, it really depends on how your updates do. If you are able to ship a small portion of the update, let's say a logic part or some or whatever, early on the build, like for the players, do it. But it's silently. The players are not gonna know that you changed something in the code, right? You're just putting things in there that you know you're gonna need, that doesn't affect the gameplay of the current players. And if you do it before, you're gonna minimize risk. Every time that you make an update in a game like this, you are a little bit like this. I hope I didn't broke anything. I hope I didn't create an exception that crashes the game. So the more that you put already in the game, try to go for it. Lastly, well, actually not lastly, I have another slide about production, but be dynamic. You're most likely on a very big project with a lot of people. The game does not stop. Players keep playing. There are going to be bugs that you need to fix. There are going to be some things completely unrelated with your, let's say, big feature that you want, that you need to jump in and fix, or an improvement or some requirement by the marketing team. I don't know. You need to be dynamic as with your feature team to say, hey, let's this Monday morning fix this, and then let's continue with that. So keep that in mind, because yeah, at least it happens. Other things about production. Don't forget about performance. If your update is amazing, it's the best thing that ever, but it has FPS drops, crashes, ANRs, it's not good. Like, technical that the game is running well for, and also imagine mobile because you have a lot of devices. If you made the performance of the game go down, like really down, that's a big no-no. You are gonna probably have more damage than good, and also you're gonna have to jump afterwards to fix it anyway, delaying the next feature. So this is something mostly for devs to have in mind, but also for you leading, let's say, this feature, that we don't forget about that. Another one that people tend to forget is the analytics trackers. Again, this is data-driven. You want to know how your feature is doing, not only by community feedback, but also by data. If you don't implement the analytic trackers well, you're not going to be able to track what you wanted to track. So try not to forget about that as well. Oh, oopsie, I clicked the wrong thing. Oh, there you go. Nice. If possible, play test yourself and also as your peers the builds before the end. Don't wait if it's a 4-month update just to get it in your hands and try it out 2 weeks before. Because well, you're gonna find a lot of little things that you say, hey, this is already not working as you wanted, and you're gonna be able just to put that beforehand. And the most important one, as production-wise, and you, let's say, being the owner of this, be there. Like, really be there. You need to be there and provide clear-cut decisions. There's going to be doubts. There's going to be surprises. There's going to be changes. Like, I can assure that, because the game is legacy, because what you thought that would be great, then you have it in your hands, is like, oh, doesn't feel that good. Actually, we're missing a point of access, or this feels weird, right? Or this is actually not what I meant with my specifications. I expect it wrong, or you understand it in the other way. The sooner you do this, as well, the better. So let's say we're jumping from production to release. One, you need to talk with a lot of people if you're actually managing the release. Try to be aligned, and this obviously you're gonna do it, let's say, weeks before, with these departments. Not, I mean, at least these 4 I think is key. Community management, they prepare the release for the players. They tease the release. We actually sometimes have calls with the players, explaining what's coming. a lot of content on the socials, whatnot, they need to be in the loop. If suddenly you release and they say like, what happened? Like, it's not recommendable. Production, and here I'm meaning the production of the whole game or the release manager. You're gonna make a big update. You know more or less the date that's gonna be. You want it to have the less risk possible in that build. So hopefully that build has only your change, and you don't have a lot of change of other feature teams coming in there. So also that's pretty good that you start, already planning with your, let's say, main producer of the game. Marketing as well. They may go for features in the stores. They need assets for that. If they want to push a little bit more with UA because this change is coming, etc. And the data team as well. You most likely, when it releases, wants to already have a little bit of a dashboard and tracking the things that you want to see. Okay, this is healthy. If you don't sync with them beforehand, well, you're not going to have it. And then you release. It's pretty exciting. Also, a little bit of fear when you do it, especially when it's a very big release, which I had the luck to work in a couple. And it's not only release, it's monitoring as well. So you need to closely monitor the build tech health. So exceptions, issues, not only like technically, because you might have put a really important bug in there, right? You need to fix it right away, but also the game economy. If your, let's say your change had something new to the economy and suddenly, the game economy, your KPI is going crazy, maybe you designed something incorrectly and you need to jump in there right away so, the economy doesn't crash. The community feeling and bug reports by them, they're gonna, especially in the Engage one, they're gonna go into that new thing right away and they're gonna fill you with good feedback and reports. And the impact. Is this having an impact or not? I'm sure that you are going to want to know this as fast as possible. Basically KPIs that you need to decide was this to improve revenue, playtime, whatnot. And I really recommend that you share this with the team. Good or bad news, doesn't matter. You didn't do the feature alone, you did it with the whole team. The team, even because this might be a little bit more business-wise, they want to know. I mean, they created this. It makes no sense to keep it in the dark. And also, usually all this data is, let's say, public inside the inside the studio, right? But it's also a little bit your job to, present it in a good way and let the team know how the players are experiencing their creation. If needed, most likely, in the following weeks, well, if needed, maybe you need a little bit of balancing. Hopefully you did a remote that you can just, change things remotely. You don't need a new build, a new release. And you're going to have some bug fixes, some improvement tasks. Maybe when you cut some low prior improvements for next weeks, try to prepare this for the next sprint. So, you keep polishing your update. That would be, let's say, this whole path in between what should I do and give it to the player's hands. And now, let's say, what happens now? Well, it doesn't stop. You need to be ready for the next feature. And try to build a buffer as possible. So now what I just showed you, and in a very, let's say, fast way, let's say pre-production for feature one, production for feature one, right? And then you release. Well, sometime during production, you need to, with the people that you need to do the pre-production of the next feature, try to have it ready right away so the team can jump on the new feature. Do try to have a gap. Releasing a feature is super stressful, especially at the very, very end. But yeah, you need to know what's going next. That's part of your responsibility as well. And perhaps you can start building a buffer, already working on the pre-production for feature 3, already working on the other one. So then you also are not stressed by having to do this at last minute, which I do not recommend as well. Learn from the production experience and the feature outcome. When I'm talking about production experience, and these are basically the retros are for, you probably, especially if you did many things in parallel, there were problems that you want to solve. The team's gonna have an opinion, and you're basically gonna get better as a team to tackle these kind of issues, right? So really learn from this production experience. I think that in the last 3 features, we have always been changing our approach a little, right? A little improvement here, a little improvement there, and the feature outcome. You basically made a bet when you decided to do this feature, right? And you thought design-wise that you would have an effect. Well, live games, and this is amazing, is almost instant feedback. You did so you planned the whole thing, you did it, you put it out, and you already know how the players are experiencing. So really take advantage of this, because it's gonna, I cannot think of a better learning experience than really thinking the whole thing, doing it with your team, and then see how the players are actually interacting with it. And lastly, I would say enjoy. Enjoy creating these awesome features with the team. It's amazing. You have a blast. Super challenging. Of course, it can get stressful. But I don't know. I love it. And also, you're able to watch how players are, playing with your feature right away. So overall, it's an awesome experience. And if you are thinking about going in that direction on your careers, well, I mean, I'm encouraging that basically. And yeah, thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much. We definitely have some time for questions, comments. The one thing I would just ask from you for the recording is the acoustics of the room. We weren't sure how that would pick up on the microphone, so if you can repeat questions as they're asked to you before you answer.
Sure.
Yeah, any questions?
Kanban or Scrum?
Do
you use Kanban or do you use more Scrum?
Scrum. Scrum sprints. But sorry, the question was if we use Kanban or Scrum. So for the feature team, because we actually use both, at least in this studio, right? For the feature team, where we're working on sprints, we use Scrum, right? And this is a bit tricky sometimes because these updates sometimes there are months, right? We don't have a sprint for months, of course not. We have 2-week sprints, right? And then we're trying to, right, especially it works out when you stage things, trying to finish certain stages on certain sprints, or maybe that stage is a couple of sprints. But there we just use normal Scrum. What does happen, and I know in Kanban, is other departments that have other, let's say, tasks outside of making this feature. So again, remember, it's a live game. There's many things that you need to do. You have the whole live ops. You need to manage that, tweaks here and there. So let's say the design team, right? The design team, I know they use Kanban, or also could be, I think, also the data team, but there they are more like tasks per person that they know that they need to get done. They don't necessarily they're not part of the sprint, right? They probably have a deadline, but those departments sometimes, manage themselves with Kanban.
How do you go about when there's like multiple blockers and identifying them earlier? Because you want to identify them in pre-production, and I guess sometimes there will probably be chain reactions of blockers and like estimating and identifying those blockers.
Okay, so sorry. The question is how do we do it to identify the blockers? I would say in pre-production, but I would also do in production, right? And act upon them. So we are basically not blocked, right? So I would say, well, usually the blockers or where they are most important are in development, so in depth, right? So you kind of already know when you're jumping in production and you're doing these stages, right? What do the devs need from other parts of the team, also from product, like certain specifications, right? And that already gives you a pretty good idea. And also at the very beginning, you are working more architecture model things, so you know that you have this amount of time to, I don't know, have the final wireframes. They're gonna jump. You kind of put this to the future, right? They're gonna jump. I don't know. In stage 3 is when they start doing certain panels. Well, you talk with your UX. We need this panel, at least 3 weeks before this thing, 2 weeks, just to have a buffer if anything happens. So when you have this high level, what I was proposing there, like high level of what all the things that you're gonna do, and you actually go with them and stage them, and you know more or less when this is happening. It's when you're doing this. I use a Gantt chart and I try to go with all departments, right? Dev, art, design, UI UX, design as well, with balancing goes a little bit more at the end, and QA, and try to see, okay, is this happening or not? You need to also take into account holidays, things like that. So this is just straightforward production to identify developers. But it could be different for different studios, but my recommendation is to really try that development doesn't stop. That's usually what takes the most time on a feature.
My question would be, you've talked a lot about sort of live operations
Mhm.
of a successful or established game.
Mhm.
And if you have a couple of pointers or tips for students that want to launch a game, mobile game, how do you prioritize? Because there's a lot like, okay, collecting player feedback, playing it yourself, collecting analytics. What's sort of like the minimum viable product you would say of monitoring software or monitoring setup, so that if I have a student game, I want to put it out so that I can get some sort of valuable insight of the performance of the game to see is this worth investing in further, or should I sort of can it put it into the portfolio, work on the next thing? What's the sort of the big things that really need to be in the product for you to be able to make decisions starting off? What's the sort of minimum viable setup?
So the question in a summary is basically what's for, let's say, a student that have a new game or want to launch a mobile game, what's the MVP of your structure, I would say, that you need to tell, is my game going well or not? So I would try to answer the question. The thing is, I don't have the direct experience of actually doing that. I land, and this is also, by the way, something I didn't say at the beginning. If you join, which is a big probability because these studios are everywhere and they need a lot of people, a game like this, well, you're already on joining an established team with a game running, right? So all these questions, all these things like what's the data platform, the data client that they use are already answered. Now, I did work before stepping in on the product things of Idle Mining Tycoon, which is the big game. I did work on new games for a little while and also have a good contact for with other POs on the new games. And my recommendation there. So first of all, if I think that the store analytics already gives you one of the most important things, especially at the beginning, which is retention. If you have a bad retention with your game, it's super hard. It depends also how is the game going to be monetized. If you have ads, you have ads placement, you're already going to be receiving, let's say, a revenue, and you kind of going to match, okay, I'm making enough money or not. But one thing that I don't have the answer to this is that I would imagine it's pretty hard to launch a, let's say, successful mobile game from scratch because you need a lot of money, a lot of marketing. I mean, like a lot, right? To put the game on the market. And also this whole part, when I was talking about new game soft launch, what they do is they have this game, let's say the core mechanic and all that, and they do a small campaign of marketing, some thousands of dollars, let's say. They gather data, they iterate, they gather data, they iterate, and each of those is, let's say, money against money and again and again. So, like going completely solo, I'm not saying that it couldn't work, perhaps, right? Again, I don't have the experience, but perhaps it could also be with a publisher that already gives you all that, structure in a way.
That's all the time we have for now. So if there are any further questions or comments, of course, you're still around.
Yep.
We have a whole other day tomorrow and today as well. So thank you all